It's a phrase I hear often. My body failed me. So when we have experienced something traumatic that happens with our family, with our body, in particular birth trauma, there can be this feeling that my body failed. So this week we're diving into this idea that my body failed me. We hear often in the birth space, your body was made to birth your baby. But for some of us, that can feel, especially after birth trauma, like a big fat lie. So let me know in the comments below if you can relate to this feeling, if you've ever said, my body failed me, my body failed, or even had providers say it was a failed TOLAC, trial of labor after cesarean, or a failed VBAC, or failure to progress. They even put it in the name of these medical terms. So if you can relate to that, let us know in the comments below. But for now, I want to talk about kind of some things we have to know before we can really even say my body failed. So let's start with that, because when I meet with moms, I find a lot of times we have this feeling that my body failed without even a deep understanding of what happened in the labor and delivery room. So the first thing I want to talk about is physiological birth. And when we have physiological birth, our body is technically designed to birth babies, right? So when we have a physiologically normal birth, our body is designed to have hormones that come from the baby's lungs specifically, that signal, hey, I'm ready to come out. Labor can begin. So when that first step is able to happen naturally, then the next part of labor is able to happen naturally, right? So what we need to know about physiologic birth is that it is easily interrupted. So when we add any kind of intervention, and an intervention can be anything from an induction to having a provider in your home. Just leaving your home is an intervention. And that's not an intervention I am arguing against. I have no care or sway in where you birth. So when you leave your home, that's your very first intervention, right? And that is a time of transition for the body. It is a signal to get out of the mindset needed to have a physiologically normal birth. So when we have a physiologically normal birth, we want to have this quiet, safe space, right? No people that make you feel unsafe, because all of those things slow down physiologically normal labor. One thing to think about is, do you feel safe with your providers, your nurses? Every single person who steps in that room has to be able to help create a safe space for that birth to really unfold physiologically. And not in every case. Some people have totally beautiful physiologic births with lots of people in and out, and their personalities may be different from a person like me who doesn't want a bunch of strangers, checking my cervix while I'm trying to bring a baby into this world, right? All of those things, every moment that we don't feel safe, every moment that somebody interrupts our flow, all of those moments interrupt the flow of oxytocin, the flow of labor, the fetal monitoring. Oh my gosh. Electronic fetal monitoring is not, conducive to a physiological labor, because it is telling this parent that she has to be, in the bed. Don't move for 20 minutes. We've got to get a good read. And that is one way that interrupts the natural, animal flow of labor. So when we are missing out on those things needed to have a physiologic birth, I don't think it's really fair to say your body failed you. But I'm not going to tell you what to say either. But can we really say that our body failed us if our birth has been interrupted at every turn? Which leads me to our next point, which is a term called iatrogenic harm. And iatrogenic is this term that means specifically relating to illness caused by medical examination or treatment. So iatrogenic harm happens in the birth space when our interventions that are meant to help birth actually become hurtful. An example of this is Pitocin. Pitocin is a cool tool for the prevention of hemorrhage. When Pitocin becomes this routine intervention, Pitocin comes with all of these extra warnings and all of these extra side effects that can cause more harm further on in your labor. And some people have even coined this term the Cascade of interventions. And this is when a person goes in for an induction, their body isn't even ready to be in labor, their baby isn't ready. And so then they have this intervention, this induction, which is an intervention, to get labor started, right? And once they have that, oftentimes the hospital wants to keep them, and then they want to administer more medication and more medication to get labor going, to keep labor going. Oh, now we've got to slow labor down. And it is this messy, fine art of managing medications and managing labor in a way that your body isn't meant to, right? We're not meant to have this Pitocin pushing us from 0 to 60 in 2.5. Our body is meant to slowly build these contractions, and some people will even have prodromal labor for like weeks before their baby comes. So speaking of that cascade of interventions, again, is it fair to say that your body failed when maybe the system failed you? Maybe those interventions failed you and created the issue that happened in the birthing room. Another thing to consider. So we talked about physiological birth. We've talked about iatrogenic harm. We've talked about the cascade of interventions. The other thing to touch base on here is sometimes we don't respond to labor and birth in a physiologically normal manner based on other factors. Some of these can include body differences, an unsafe environment. We are literally animals, and so we are made to not allow our baby to come into an unsafe environment, because years and years and years and years and years and years and years ago, that would be the difference between life and death. The other thing is interruptions to labor, which we kind of talked about with physiological birth. And then the last one is a history of assault, specifically sexual assault, can have a huge impact on the body's ability to relax and bring that baby out. The things that we're experiencing in labor, the lack of control, the places that, if you're in the hospital system, having your cervix checked, all of these things can be reminiscent of a sexual assault, which then impacts the ability of labor to progress. And that is something that, is important to talk to your provider about beforehand. And this is in no way meant to shame you or your body if that is your story. It is something that providers need to be sharing with their clients and helping them work through in preparation for birth, because it has an impact. The next thing I want to talk a little bit about is the impact of interventions, of complications, of birth injuries on body image and body connection. So when we have a surgical birth the scar, the impacts of healing, when there is excessive tearing, all of those things impact our relationship with our body because the body is then trying to heal and raise a baby. So it's bad enough when we have birth trauma without injury because the brain is injured and the brain is trying to heal. But then when we have birth trauma with a birth injury, we have those physical plain injuries that are trying to heal as well. And then along with that are the body differences, right? If there's literally been incisions in my body to address these complications, my body has changed in so many ways throughout pregnancy and postpartum anyway. And then when we look in the mirror and see something different, that can be alarming, right? And that's just the way that it looks. That doesn't even really take much into account for the actual physical healing that needs to take place. The other thing with that is oftentimes you will hear when surgeries happen, there is this dissociation from the body, or when things become unsafe, even without surgical intervention, there is this disconnection, and we might call that dissociation, where the mind kind of slips away from the body and isn't all there. And that is a safety mechanism, and that is not something to be hard on ourselves or our body about. So moving on from there, tomorrow we're going to dive a little bit deeper into one of these parts. I think we're diving into the cascade of interventions, but each day this week we'll be diving into a little bit more some of the common questions that come up with these things. So I hope that you will hit subscribe and follow along with the body image week and how you can start to kind of reconnect with your body after birth trauma. There is a waitlist link in my show notes below for you to be the first to know. I have a great resource coming for you that does walk you through this reconnection as part of your healing process. See you next time.